All right, well, hey, Zach, thanks for joining us here at RCM Innovators at Becker's. It's good to be out and about. You're helping us with the maiden voyage of kicking off our live stream series. So, hello, friends at LinkedIn. So today, just wanted to, again, thanks for joining us. Wanted to just talk about who you are, where do you work, what are you doing, and we talked a little bit earlier about innovation in the back office, but we can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Sounds great.
You're a former chief product officer, so
correct.
I'm going to ask you some questions about what did you do to innovate.
Sounds good. A little bit of background about myself. I'm Zach Taft. I currently lead our digital ventures organization at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. 15 years in digital healthcare. Started off as a medical scribe and built one of the first medical scribe businesses in the United States, and actually worked with CMS and JCO on building out the rules and regulations around using a non-clinically trained individual to provide clinical documentation and revenue cycle support. Ended up starting another business around integrating voice recognition technology into the Epic environment, which Nuance ended up buying in 2016, and ended up working with one of your current colleagues, Jeff Lipes, at Immodal, which was purchased by 3M back in 2018 for about $1 billion. So I've worked with over 300 healthcare systems around the United States and the world. I've provided services on 6 different continents, and hoping to get that 7th one pretty soon. So what I'm doing today is I have probably one of the most interesting roles I think that's out there. I wear 2 hats. First is I work with our internal principal investigators at MSK on how do we productize and commercialize their assets. So our next-gen sequencing assets, our precision oncology assets, all the way through how do we provide patient engagement services across the world. So that's one hat. And then the second hat is how do I work with organizations like yourself where you've got a great product, you're looking for that clinical partnership to bring you into MSK, provide that clinical expertise, and work together to improve healthcare. So I very much enjoy what I do, and it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, and you mentioned when we were talking that there's a big focus on precision oncology.
Yep.
That's a big thing.
Yes.
Like, how do you fund that?
It's a great question. Precision medicine has become very popular over the last 10 years, and especially in oncology. There's been a lot of funding around that through the life sciences organizations, but also through the way that we provide care. So MSK is one of the leading research organizations for oncology care in the world. And the way that we fund that is we have a huge research arm, about 10,000 researchers, scientists, PhDs, et cetera, who on every day are working at ways to improve the way that we provide cancer treatment. And then through that, we have partnerships with life sciences organizations around the world, and how do we use our next-gen sequencing, our precision oncology assets, our exome assay assets, et cetera, and how do we do this in a way that improves the treatment of cancer without adding the burden of a financial overhead. So as a part of our organization, we actually report out to the NIH every 7 years on how is the improvement of care actually reducing the cost of oncology. And through that, we get additional funding. So we've actually shown that if you come to an MSK-like organization, that the cost of overall treatment is actually 18% less than if you went to a community cancer site.
Oh, okay.
And then we're also seeing we're getting you through cancer treatment and onto the other side even faster and quicker. So for employers, when you think about having senior leadership that's going to be out for a significant amount of time, where do you want to invest that cancer treatment? Do you want to do it at a local site, or do you want to come to MSK where we can decrease that time to care? Yeah, so it's really interesting.
That's the kind of stuff that we are so passionate at VisitQuate about working with our clients to tackle administrative waste. 300 billion of administrative waste. Making an order of magnitude improvement in that number and shifting that,
yes.
I want to fund what you're doing.
Exactly.
Clinical innovation gets all the dollars with CapEx. Hopefully, we're going to start shifting more to the back office, because the more you invest in the back office, this is our core premise, then we can tackle administrative waste and give you guys the money, because that's where it should be, right?
Yep. Completely agree. And as a not-for-profit cancer care center, we don't have shareholders. We have patients and we have researchers. So any additional revenue that an organization like VisiQuate would generate allows us to put that back into bringing patients in from around the world to seek care that they wouldn't normally have been allowed to, like patients from the Ukraine. And then also being able to fund the research that leads to that next horizon of how do we cure cancer. So you're directly in line with the core values and core mission of an organization like MSK.
Great. And you're also a former chief product officer.
I am.
So I love to talk to chief product officers and people in innovation. When you were in your role, how do you know where to start, right? Talk to us about like innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've found is that there are insurmountable problems, if you will, in healthcare, and they're not going to be solved within the next decade or even 5 or 6 decades. So what I look at are what are the low-hanging fruit problems, and what is the root core of that problem? So at Immodal and at 3M, the root core was physician burnout as a part of clinical documentation. So even diving into that, is clinical documentation, as in creating the patient note, the SOAP note, the area that's really causing the heartache, or is it the tertiary administrative functions around that, like revenue cycle? And what we determined was the actual creation of the note, though it is a burden, is not as burdensome as filling out social history, allergies, making sure that you've got enough systems covered that it's going to hit a level 5 bill, making sure that you have the right ICD-10 code. Those are the areas that as a clinician, as you spend 8 years in schooling, is that really where you want to be spending your time, or is it with the patient? So I look at those core problems, and then I look at what are the assets that we have as an organization that could potentially start to chip away at those problems. So at Immodal, we specialized in NLU, AI, and machine learning, and we also had a huge workhorse team that knew clinical documentation. So you were able to provide a remote assistant that was able to chip away at that core burdensome product, while also looking at how do we start to automate those systems, which I believe is what VisiQuate is doing. How do I solve a problem with human beings today, with the future looking at how do I automate that process and make it repeatable and scalable as you work with new organizations?
What I love about your use case is that we always advocate going narrow. You know, when you're doing AI and machine learning, don't boil the ocean, right? It's the more that you've got a really sharp business problem and a very narrow focus, and you get people used to, like, this doesn't have to be just a buzzword. Like, convert all the buzzwords that we use into, like, value. But it's always best done when you go narrow. So it sounds like that's what you guys did.
Exactly. And healthcare is so ripe for this opportunity. There's the funding, there's the willingness, there's the drive from across the entire organization. For us at MSK, even our CHIO, Pete Stetson, he's partnering with us to say, we have these fabulous resources, but they're a finite amount of resources. What can we do to partner with outside organizations to help reinforce them, to be force multipliers for our tremendous talent? And I just think right now is the right time to be in healthcare IT and to be thinking innovatively and thinking strategically of how do we solve these problems.
What advice do you have for folks, you know, in hospitals that have some innovation dollars? How do they go about, because it's tough when you tackle a big problem like we're going to do AI in the back office. You know, any advice for folks about how to make that practical and pragmatic? And
Absolutely. I've worked with a couple of organizations throughout my career that believe that they can do it themselves. And they have very intelligent people, and they do have very intelligent people. But what I've seen through my consulting and through my work with these organizations, not just here in the United States, but across the world, the NHS is a good example of this. Trying to do something in-house as a snowflake, so a one-off, you're probably not going to be successful. It's not going to be scalable, and ultimately you're going to have to pull it out because it's not going to integrate with your EHR. What I highly recommend is evaluate the market. Find those individuals, those organizations that want to partner with you and help solve your problem. Not sell you a widget, but actually partner with you, dive in deep, look at the problems that your organization are having, and partner with them. Now, I say that a little biased because that's exactly what I do for a living for
Sure.
a large hospital system, is go out and reach out to organizations
Yeah.
like yours and say, hey, I'd like for you to help solve this problem,
Yeah.
and how do we partner together? And so I am a little biased, but
Yep.
I've seen this. I worked with Yale, and Alan Zale at Yale, he's their chief medical informatics officer, where he said exactly that. He goes, Zach, we can pull anything off the shelf, and it's probably going to solve some of our problem, but we want to partner with an organization to truly solve the issue that is happening here.
Yeah.
And so they invested in us, and the outcomes were tremendous. We solved, to a certain extent, part of the physician burnout issues that they had there, that every organization has, but they made the investment in both money and time to truly solve that. So big kudos to that team.
Yeah, it's the concept of the mastermind too, right? And mastery. Like we always advocate, don't do complex data integration.
Yeah.
You know, we've been doing it for 22 years across 2 companies and have engineers and subject matter experts that have done their 10,000 hours.
Yep.
So, like, why would you want to compete with that?
Yeah.
You can buy tools and say that you're going to do data wrangling, but it's really the expertise that matters and the know-how, and
Yeah, one of the best analogies that I heard was a family friend of ours said, hey, if you buy a private jet, you're not going to train your son to fly that private jet and have him fly you around because you need a pilot.
Yeah.
What you're going to do is you're going to find somebody who's got 5,000 hours on frame,
Yeah.
because you know them, you trust them, they have the experience, and 99% of the time your son would probably be fine, but it's that 1% of the time that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Or it's like, you can buy a bunch of musical instruments, but so what? And you can take guitar lessons on YouTube, but I don't think that you want to go in front of Carnegie Hall
No.
a year into that, right?
Probably
so
not.
It's yeah, we live in a world of, complex analogies to convey that point, that it's not about the tools, it's not about the technology. Very often it's about domain knowledge, like
Exactly.
deep expertise and passion, right?
Definitely the passion.
What should I be asking you that I haven't around innovation?
Oh, man.
What do you like to just advocate, and what are you passionate about?
The biggest thing that I'm passionate about is patient care. I think there's so many options for innovation out there that take the patient completely out of it. And in healthcare, you have to remember the first and foremost is how do we provide a high level of care? And I think in this industry right now, with media and with marketing, with social media as well, is we look at the thing that's drawing the most buzz, but it's not actually solving the problem that we need to solve. And so I highly recommend, as you look to bringing in outside vendors and looking at outside partners, really evaluate what is under the hood and what are they trying to solve, and how does that fit with your mission statement? Because there are organizations out there who will fit within the mission statement and solve these problems. There are organizations out there that are going to detract from your ability to solve these problems and provide that high level of patient care.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly recommend that, suggest that. The other piece I highly recommend, if you're on the vendor side, is look at healthcare organizations, look at those strategic partnerships. We can bring in the clinical expertise to your expertise and domain expertise, and that partnership is more likely going to solve the problem. And same thing as a hospital organization. We want to default, because we have budgets, to wanting to solve it ourselves. But there is proof points throughout healthcare that prove that bring in those external organizations, create that partnership, look at what that joint solution is for the mission statement, and you'll be much better off and actually off to the races solving the problem.
Yeah, that's great advice. So how about this? Let's go to the year, not too far out, let's go to the year 2025. What do you want to get done?
Oh man.
What do you want to have, like, just, we crushed that goal? And how are you going to do it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No. Two tough questions. Well, in the current seat that I'm sitting in right now for MSK, it is, I've been a part of MSK for 6 months now, and what I, even as being a vendor, never realized is our ability to provide cancer care is so far down the train tracks than I ever believed it was possible. How we're using technology and machine learning and precision oncology to solve what I personally believed was unsolvable is incredible.
Yep.
So for me personally, what I want to do as a part of this organization is how do I get and project that outside the 4 walls of MSK? If I have a family member who's diagnosed with cancer and they're living in Ann Arbor or in Indianapolis or in Cincinnati, how do I enable them to get this high quality care without actually having to come to Manhattan? And these are all problems that are in the process of being solved. So that domain expertise, I would love
It's giving me some goosebumps right there.
Good.
Yeah.
So this domain expertise, MSK as the hub, and working with our partners throughout the United States and throughout the globe to reinforce them, to backstop them, to provide them the expertise, but also to learn from them as well. The community oncology centers are a valuable asset. How do we leverage them as a hub, but also push out to them our expertise? And how are we going to solve that? There's a lot of work that's going on internally. We have again, biased, I think we have some of the best leadership in healthcare today. It's mission driven, passionate. We're doing this not because of a paycheck.
You're definitely a marquee logo.
Yes, exactly. So working with this senior leadership to start to make that pivot. And thankfully, this is an organization that very much wants to do it, is already actively doing this. We work with Dana-Farber, MD Anderson, City of Hope. And the partnerships between these organizations, especially the research organizations, are very high. We have a database called CBioPortal. So all the genetic data that's being used by Dana-Farber, MD Anderson, and MSK is funneled into this publicly available domain that allows our researchers to leverage that data to improve outcomes. So how are we going to do that? Continue to leverage those partnerships, and then also looking at vendor partnerships to accelerate that development, and then also use, because of the pandemic, the ability to provide care remotely and just continue to enhance that.
So let me ask you that. That kind of reminds me of collaboration. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like sometimes we're not really competing. We're trying to all work together to move the needle for the patient.
Exactly.
But in what you just said, how much of that is a marketing dynamic versus like a operations dynamic? It sounds like getting the word out. I mean, that's really powerful what you said.
I think it's a marketing dynamic, but it's not a singular institution marketing dynamic.
Right.
It's an overall healthcare marketing dynamic.
That's right.
Our marketing team at MSK does a fabulous job at putting out the right information to the right people and really showing where innovation is going.
Yeah.
And if anything, under-promising and over-delivering, which is a personal core belief of myself.
Yeah.
But I think it's also collaboration, I think, is the best way to say.
Yeah.
People always ask me, so what's the better hospital system? MD Anderson, MSK, Dana-Farber, and I say there is not a better.
Yeah.
There's a collaboration amongst these organizations that is, if you have this type of disease, this is the organization that is best equipped to treat you, but they're also pulling from resources across the entire United States and really globally to help solve that problem.
It's like classical music. It's like
Exactly.
you can have Bach and Mozart and Beethoven.
Yes.
Yeah.
And having a mixtape with all those on it is probably the best way to drive from Indianapolis to Chicago for a conversation with you.
Yeah. So what about any books around innovation or disruption or any leaders? Where do you draw inspiration from?
Oh man. So there's a lot of books out there that I've looked to. Actually, I graduate from the University of Michigan on Thursday, which I'm very excited about, and had a professor who, thank you, had a professor in business school who provided a couple different books that are actually more of how do you project influence and how do you use that influence for good. We were talking earlier about that influence and being used for good, but also used for the negative reasons.
Yeah.
So it's a great book. One of them is called Never Eat Alone. Or Never Eat Lunch Alone.
Yep.
Highly recommend that. Great book.
Yeah.
So just
it's on my list.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'd move it up, but you probably don't have a problem with eating lunch alone.
I'm an introvert. I like to sometimes eat alone.
I'm right there with you.
I'm always reading, but.
And then from industry-wide, I've been lucky enough in my career to have some incredible mentors, both on the academic medical center side and on the vendor side, where I look to them. If I've got a question, and even if I think I'm 99% right, I reach out to these individuals and I benchmark where I think is right. And there are some fabulous leaders who are out there that are still actively working, and those who have recently retired who really know this industry quite well and have provided some great guidance and resources. One shout out who has been a huge mentor of mine is Scott McKenzie, who is our CEO of Immodal. And whenever I've got an
Sure.
issue or a problem, I can go right to him, and he helps me dissect it and think
Yeah.
about it. And as an innovator in healthcare, he's definitely somebody to have.
I've met Scott in a former life, and I know what you mean. He's a great guy.
Really, truly is.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's a Michigan alum, so that makes it even better.
There you go. Yeah, right on. Well, hey man, thanks a lot. I mean, any other things that you want to cover, around disruption or?
Yeah, I'm very excited to see where healthcare is going, especially with the application of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I like to see the big vendors stepping in and helping solve some problems, but also looking towards collaborations. Microsoft is one of those. I work with Dr. David Rue, and his ability to connect vendors outside of Microsoft to the overall goal in Michigan is incredible. And
Yeah.
I noticed the same thing with AWS and IBM. So I'm excited to see how this industry is coming together to solve some very critical problems.
Yeah, fantastic. Any other things you want to talk about?
No, this has been fabulous.
All right. Well,
been a
hey man,
pleasure.
thanks for helping us kick this off.
No, excited to do it.
Yeah,
It's a great organization and a great conference to be at.
Yeah, really good to meet you, and have an awesome show.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah. Cheers.
it.